Welcome to a new video. Let's take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. The first story is called, "You Want to Enforce a New Limit?" I am a business consultant. Usually, during the week, we are at the client site and get paid for travel, meals, etc. The meal reimbursement policy is quite flexible and doesn't limit what we can claim, like some of the other consulting companies. So we can claim lunch, drinks, whatever. The policy, however, does lay down a guidance for a daily limit for food expenses, based on the country where you're traveling. It specifically says the word guidance in the policy. It is a guidance, not a hard limit. For the United Kingdom, where my current project is, the limit is £40 per day, which is mostly okay but can be a bit low if you're in the centre of London, for example. Now I do intermittent fasting, so most of the days I don't have breakfast and lunch, and just have one big meal a day, and have no problems keeping to the £40, it's usually around 20. On some days, I might go to a fancy restaurant, have a couple of scotches with a steak, and run up a £60 bill. But during the course of a 5-day week, my average meals would run about £30 a day, if not less. I've never had a problem claiming these expenses in my 9 years with the company, but recently a new project manager, a bean counter, came on board. And he sent back a couple of my expense reports for having meal expenses in excess of the £40 for a couple of days, even though the average meal expense over the week was much less than £40. I tried to reason with him, told him that anyway, it was a guidance and not a hard limit, and I was keeping the costs down on other days. But he refused to budge and said I could only claim £40 a day for food. So guess what, I started doing exactly that. Every day, I made sure I was claiming £40 or thereabouts for food. I started buying meals for the homeless people around the train station to make sure I could make up the £40. So now, where I was claiming less than £150 a week for meals, I now claim £200 and get some good karma for it. The next story is called, "The Laughing Stock of Our Store." I work as a butcher at a store where you can buy large quantities of items at near wholesale prices. One day as I was pulling the case in order to store them on our freezer overnight. I will generally stack the meats and make things easier for me about 5 minutes before the store closes. A grumpy manager comes over and asked me what I was doing right as I was bringing racks out to put the meat on, a couple of minutes after the doors have closed. He flips out for whatever reason and orders me to unstack things and wait for him to tell me to pull the cases. Until they finish the walk to ensure everyone has left the building, I was not supposed to touch the cases. Okay then, want to mess with me for no reason when you mostly just sit in the office twiddling your thumbs instead of helping on the floor or even answering the phone? We are on. The next night I waited, leaning on the case. The manager drives by on a forklift he is using like a Segway to check on people. 10 minutes pass and I'm still standing, but I will probably be pushed into overtime because pulling things take a while to do. Another 10 minutes go by and he sees me and this time asks why I haven't started pulling the cases. Well, you said I couldn't without your permission. Instantly red with anger, he starts telling me I know better and he is planning to write me up. Sure, for following your direct order? The next day I got a visit from our warehouse manager, the assistant warehouse supervisor, our fresh foods department manager, various co-workers, and my boss, the meat manager. Every single one of them asked me about it and got a good chuckle from it. All of the people he spoke to asked the manager, "Well, did you tell him he could pull the cases?" So he became a punchline for a few weeks. When one of my real managers swung by, they would stop and ask, "Hey, did the manager tell you it was okay to put more product out? Hey, did he tell you it was okay to make hamburgers, even when it's about to run out? Hey, did he tell you you could help the customer?" The third story is called, "Challenge Accepted." This happened a few years ago, when I was working at a grocery store deli. The main part of our job was to use a slicer to cut cold-cut meats and cheeses for customers. One day, an older gentleman walked up to the counter and you could just see the bad day he had been having on his face. It looked like someone had kicked his puppy before dumping on his lawn. You know the kind. Anyway, he walks up and asks in a really disgruntled voice, "I need exactly 2/3 of a pound of this cheese, in a solid block. And yes, I know you can't get it to the exact weight. I don't care, just get it done." Now, normally I try and be as polite as possible. But one thing you're never short on at a deli is rude customers. But something about this guy's attitude twisted something in me the wrong way, and I thought to myself, you know what? Challenge accepted. Now, if you've never worked in a deli before, something that might not really have crossed your mind before is that not all cheeses weight the same. Some are pretty light, others are dense and heavy. Normally, this isn't a big problem since you wait as you cut and can adjust the thickness of the slice as needed. When it is a solid chunk though, things become a little harder. More so if you have some angry dude waiting on you who looks like he'll tell you to recut the chunk if it's just slightly off. And if they do that, you're now stuck with a slightly off chunk of cheese that you're probably not going to be able to sell and have to either cut it up and mark it down or throw it out. So, me working at a deli for the past 5 hours brought me into full engineer mode. I weighed out the total weight and length of the large block, doing the quick calculations on a piece of spare paper, and measuring out the exact size needed to get the weight required, before using a knife to chop off a chunk from the end. The mechanical slices were not big enough in order to fully cut it, but the total work only took about 45 seconds. I've always been good at math. I put the cheese up on the scale, it blinks for a moment as it's waiting and pops up with the exact amount, on the dot. The older gentleman just looks down at the scale with a frown and squints his eyes, huffs like he's disappointed, then grabs his cheese and walks away. Though as he was walking away, I couldn't help see a slight smile on his face and hear him murmur, "Good job." Overall, I was pretty proud of the work. I still remember that moment years later, even if I couldn't tell you any of the other hundreds of people I'd served. The next story is called, "Sure, I will help you save money." I was caught in the fallout of this malicious compliance alongside every student in every art program in my college. The fallout was drastic, to say the least. I'm taking a visual design program at a community college. It's the middle of exam month and we're working to finish a semester-long project that doubles as our final exam. Naturally, everyone is working overtime to get things finished. I was in the computer lab, working near the back. The place I'm working on is also near one of the server banks. I'm wrapping up my work and getting ready to submit when suddenly the file transfer stops and it says I've lost connection to the server. No big deal, I figure that it's probably the fact that the servers are overloaded. Up until other people in the lab are asking if anyone lost connection to the server. That's when I notice the distinct smell of something akin to melting plastic. A few minutes of investigating and the cause is found. Turns out that all the server banks are cooked. Completely. Everyone in the lab agrees to email the person who handles those servers, who just so happens to be our teacher. He shows up half an hour later, with a wide grin on his face. The teacher is absolutely giddy. He announces, after sitting against the table at the front of the room for 10 minutes, "Sorry everyone, but it looks like the servers are going to be down for the remainder of the semester. Be sure to send a thank you letter to the dean of the college." He later went on to explain that the dean ordered him to shut down the cooling system of the servers and switch to one centralized system. But he protested it and tried to explain that the system would fail, which would subsequently cause all the banks to overheat. However, the dean simply told him to do it or else she'd fire him, then hire someone who would. He is known to fight any decisions made that involve handling the computers and everything related to them. Primarily because he set the system up himself and everyone that's been hired to help him handle it messes it up in some form or another. So, he decided to execute some compliance. We haven't been told if the backup servers were affected nor how much this will cost the college. But the server holds all the data for every art program in the college, so a lot of people have been affected. Moreover, with the servers effectively down, we can't submit our final exam. We've been told that we have to print our projects out and that the expenses will be covered by the college. The next story is called, "You Want a Booth?" Two ladies walk into the restaurant I work at. I look at them and smile politely. "Hey there ladies, how are you doing?" They straight up ignore me and walk up to the host stand, finish whatever conversation they were having, and I stood there, just looking at them. They look at me, annoyed like I was just supposed to assume that they had two people and wanted a table. People do come in a lot, waiting for some other people. It happens a lot, so we never assume numbers. They very rudely ask for a table for two. So I bring them to one of the tables on the first level. Still being very polite. The one woman demands, "No, this won't work, bring us into the part of the dining room." She points to the second level of the dining room, so I walk them to a table on the second level. Seriously? This is right in the middle of the walkway. "Give us a booth, we want a booth." I smiled, holding back some attitude. We have a rotational order to follow, so each server gets the same amount of tables, and we get into trouble when we don't. So that's why it's kind of inconvenient, but not usually that big of a deal. I look around, and had one booth that was meant for 6, but it was attached to a family of 6. 2 adults and 4 very young, very loud kids, and another booth that was meant for just 4. I see the kids jumping in the booth, yelling, throwing food. The one in the high chair had a mountain of mac and cheese piled up on the floor beneath him. The parents sit there, trying to ignore their kids but keep getting pelted by little pieces of broccoli. I grab the menus off the table they refused, once again, and head towards the 6 tops booth. I set them down and quickly say, "There you go. Enjoy." And then walk away before they have a chance to say anything to oppose this. They asked the server to speak to a manager and complained that I was rude, when I legit was extremely polite to these two ladies. My manager knew that they were just being ridiculous and dismissed it, thankfully. But it's crazy what people will try and do to get people they don't even know in trouble. On their way out, I made sure to say, "Take care, ladies. Have a great day." They just rolled their eyes at me. The last story is called, "Just Hit the Key." This is a story from my teenage years. Once upon a time, I owned an Isuzu. I loved that vehicle, and I put it through hell. It put up with it for a long time, but a trip through Death Valley was the final straw and it blew the head gasket. I loved this vehicle, so I wanted to keep it. I towed it to my grandfather's house, as he had an amazing garage. This man taught me an amazing amount. He was also in the pump field and a master machinist. He was also a Navy boxing champion. About 168 centimeters, bushy white hair, and a beard, built like a brick house with a bottom line you didn't want to cross. Love Grandpa, but don't make him mad. Anyways, I get to his garage and I tell him what happened. We order a replacement cylinder head, gaskets, bolts, and I go to start taking it apart. He stops me. "Where is it blown?" "What? Which cylinder is leaking?" "I don't know. I was just going to pull the head." No. First, we'll run a scope into the engine to see if it's worth saving, but need to locate the blow. Pull the spark plugs." So I do. A few minutes later, all the spark plugs are pulled, but even with a flashlight, we can't see well enough. My grandfather looks at me. "Turn it over." "Grandpa, I don't know if that's a good idea." I said turn it over. "Grandpa, it might be." "Boy," I said turn it over, now. "Okay." He leans in close to the engine over the fender with his flashlight and I hop in and hit the starter. My grandfather is greeted with a face full of coolant blasting out of the third cylinder. He stands up with his face, hair and beard covered and dripping a wonderful brown and green sludgy mixture. Slowly, he pulls a rag out of his pocket and wipes down his eyes and face. I'm trying to keep a straight face. He turns to face me and looks directly into my eyes, beard still dripping. "I better not hear a word about this from you, boy." "Yes, sir. I miss that man." Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider subscribing to the channel for more content. Let me know what you think about the stories in the comment section below. Have a great day. Bye bye.